The Pentagon has quietly ushered in a new era of domestic military involvement. This September, they revised a crucial document, DoD Directive 5240.01. This directive governs how the U.S. military operates within the United States. The changes, chilling. They grant the military sweeping powers to engage in domestic law enforcement, even authorizing lethal force under certain conditions. We're moving further away from the traditional role of the military, defending against external threats. Instead, we're normalizing their presence in our everyday lives. We have already been witness to the militarization of the police across America. Now the line between soldier and cop is blurred further. This has grave implications for our civil liberties and the very fabric of American democracy. The revised DoD Directive 5240.01 fundamentally changes the game. It allows the military to be deployed domestically for a wider range of situations than ever before. Think natural disasters, large-scale protests, even events deemed critical infrastructure protection. This broad language is deeply concerning. It opens the door for abuse, for the military to be used as a political tool. Even more alarming is the authorization of lethal force. The directive lays out specific conditions where soldiers can use deadly force on American soil. These include situations where necessary to prevent the loss of life or serious bodily harm. This vague language is ripe for misinterpretation and could easily lead to tragic consequences. Remember Kent State, the 1970 shooting of unarmed college students protesting the Vietnam War? That dark chapter in American history should serve as a stark warning. Deploying soldiers trained for war onto our streets is a recipe for disaster. It risks escalating situations, not de-escalating them. Power, once granted, is rarely relinquished. The Pentagon's move has ignited a firestorm of controversy. Supporters argue these changes are vital in a world facing complex and evolving threats. They say the military is uniquely equipped to handle certain situations that civilian law enforcement might not be prepared for. They point to the chaos of the January 6th Capitol protest as a prime example. Critics, however, are sounding the alarm. They see this as a blatant power grab, a dangerous erosion of the line between military and civilian authority. They fear these changes will lead to the militarization of American society, with soldiers patrolling our streets and monitoring our every move. This, they argue, is not the America our forefathers envisioned. The debate cuts to the core of what it means to live in a free society. How do we balance the need for security with the preservation of our fundamental liberties? This is not just an academic debate. The outcome will determine the kind of country we want to be. To understand the gravity of these new rules, we must look to the past. The Insurrection Act of 1807 looms large in this discussion. This act gives the president the authority to deploy the military domestically to suppress rebellions and enforce federal law. Throughout history, the Insurrection Act has been invoked during times of social unrest and political upheaval. From the Whiskey Rebellion to the Civil Rights Movement, the act has been used to quell dissent and maintain order. The new DoD directive, while not directly invoking the Insurrection Act, operates in a similar vein. It grants the military broad authority to intervene in domestic affairs, blurring the lines between military and civilian law enforcement. This is a dangerous precedent. The potential consequences of these changes are chilling. Our freedoms, speech, assembly, and protection from unreasonable searches are at risk. How do you think our Second Amendment rights will be treated? Soldiers on our streets increase the potential for abuse. History shows governments using the military to silence dissent. Look to Stalin, Hitler, and Mao for examples. These new rules open the door for similar abuses. This is a direct assault on our constitutional rights. We must be vigilant in defending them. The expansion of military power on American soil has reignited a debate about the Second Amendment. Second Amendment proponents argue that the right to bear arms is not just about self-defense against criminals, but also about resisting government tyranny. They see the militarization of domestic law enforcement as a clear and present danger, a sign that the government is becoming increasingly hostile to its own citizens. The Founding Fathers included the Second Amendment as the ultimate safeguard against tyranny. It ensures that the people will always have the means to resist an overreaching government. They argue that the Founding Fathers understood the importance of a well-armed citizenry as a deterrent to government overreach. This perspective, however, is often met with skepticism and fear by those whose moronic view gun ownership primarily through the lens of crime and violence. They argue that an armed citizenry is more likely to lead to chaos and bloodshed than to deter a tyrannical government. The debate over the Second Amendment is complex and multifaceted. The Pentagon's new directive raises profound questions about the Constitution. Constitutional scholars argue these new rules violate the founders' intent. They cite the Posse Comitatus Act as evidence to limit the military's domestic role. The new directive is seen as bypassing the Constitution. Others argue the Constitution must adapt to modern threats. This debate reflects competing visions of government and power balance. The Pentagon's new rules paint a chilling picture of the future, a future where the line between the military and domestic law enforcement is blurred beyond recognition, a future where soldiers patrol our streets, armed and authorized to use lethal force against American citizens. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It's a very real possibility, one that is becoming increasingly likely with each passing day. The militarization of policing is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening gradually for decades, fueled by the war on drugs, the war on terror, and a culture of fear and militarism. But the new DoD directive represents a significant escalation. It normalizes the use of the military for domestic law enforcement, paving the way for a future where soldiers are no longer the exception, but the rule. This is a future we must resist with everything we have. The time for complacency is over. The Pentagon's stealthy power grab demands our attention and our action. We must demand transparency from our elected officials. We need open and honest public discourse about the role of the military in a free society. And we must insist on robust oversight mechanisms to prevent abuse and overreach. This is not a partisan issue. It's about safeguarding the very soul of our nation. It's about protecting the freedoms that generations of Americans have fought and died for. We cannot allow fear and expediency to erode the very principles that make America worth defending. Contact your representatives. The future of our republic hangs in the balance. Keep your head down and your powder dry.